Okay, so I have one question. If you're Max Verstappen and you waited 5.5 years to have a car worthy of winning championships, are you prepared to wait again? Or are you going to put your chips on the team with the best odds? Kia ora, I'm Kimmy. I talk about F1 in the world's second worst accent, and yeah, I know this is getting pretty old right now, but let's have a wee chat about Max. If there's one thing that everyone seems to agree on, it's that he's a guy who values loyalty and is very generous with his own. And you'd be forgiven for assuming that now that the roadblock to retaining him within Red Bull appears to have been removed, that he'll continue to show that loyalty to the team he's been with for a decade. And yeah, of course, he might. But then also Max Verstappen spent 5 years between 2016 and 2020 in a car that couldn't challenge for championships, mostly because of the power unit. And if there's one thing that Max has been firm on over the years, it's that he is there to win, and all he wants is a car he can do that in. Now, I already touched on this in my video about the Horner firing, but I'm going to reiterate it. If you're Max Verstappen and you have all the information at hand about where your 2026 car is sitting on both aero and engine performance, and you don't like what you're seeing, are you really prepared to wait another few years to see if things turn around? Or do you jump ship? This is a guy who's made it clear he has no intention of racing in Formula One well into his 30s. And sure, the addiction might end up trumping that logical retirement plan, and if he ends up with a car that's able to extract the level of dominance we saw from the mid to late 2010s Mercedes, then it might be hard to resist. But even then, I doubt it. And it's not even just about F1 itself, it's about everything that surrounds it. It's about the media, the calendar, and the FIA's constant interference in what can and cannot come out of people's mouths. And Max is a smart guy. He knows all this probably isn't going to change. Much anyway, it depends on what happens with this year's election, but even then, things like the circuits, the busier race calendar, and the media commitments are all pretty much set in stone at this point. And he's on record saying he doesn't like a lot of that. So what do you do when you're Max Verstappen and you're looking down the barrel of a couple of years potentially fighting in the midfield? Well, I think probably taking one good look at Charles Leclerc is a good place to start. But in all seriousness, you have to start looking elsewhere if you want a good chance at ending your career on a high point. And yeah, none of us really know where Red Bull's going to be sitting when the cars cross the finish line in Melbourne next year. But considering the general consensus about the Mercedes engine potentially being another monster like what we saw during their domination era, the mass exodus of Red Bull powertrains and other technical staff to Mercedes, and the general watering down of their senior leadership over the past couple of years, I think those who think the dumping of Christian Horner has cemented Max's place in Milton Keynes are barking up the wrong tree. This is now about where Max is going to place his final bet: Red Bull or Mercedes, or perhaps a third option. Now, in a hypothetical perfect world, or at least one where Merc has the car to back it up, my opinion is this: Max goes to Mercedes, who retains George, loans Kimi out to Alpine for a couple of years because that's nice and neat and tidy with the engine deal, lets Max win a couple more championships, gives us a great bit of entertainment while he and George get all up in each other's business every other week. We all have a great time, or a terrible one, depending on who you're rooting for, and then when Max decides to give it all up for full-time dad duty, part-time esports and endurance driver, Kimi returns to Mercedes with a bit more experience under his belt and some serious confidence and satisfaction having survived Flavio. Sadly, that perfect world is unlikely to materialise, but a girl can create fanfic-esque scenarios in her YouTube scripts if she feels like it. No, I think Toto is more likely to want to hang on to Kimi so he can keep full control over his career and can continue to mould him exactly into who he wants him to be, kind of like what Jos did with Max, just without the blood relative factor. And of course, there's been a lot going on this past week. What have we had? We've had Max and Toto both in Sardinia at the same time. We've had people on the internet doing what they do and faking pap shots of them together. We've had this whole Max to Mercedes thing go from "it's over now that Christian's out" to "wait a minute, this might actually be happening." You've got those who are busting out conspiracy theories about Max deliberately spinning at Silverstone to help him get closer to activating his exit clause, that he was so nice to Kimi in Austria because of the same thing, and not because Max is just actually like a pretty decent and kind person. And you've got those who are saying that Jos won and Christian lost and now everything is fine, actually. Now let's get one thing straight though. Max Verstappen wants to win. If Max Verstappen really wanted to manipulate his own exit, he would have done it already. Considering how bad all of his teammates have been performing in that car, I imagine it wouldn't be hard for him to drop back 1 or 2 positions in every race and still make it look believable. But he's still chasing wins even though the car's only capable of them on a very good day and only with him in the cockpit. Know if Max already has a deal on the table with Mercedes, that will include a buyout contingency, which means the conversation would have probably already been had with Red Bull. Perhaps not directly between the teams and only on Max's management side, but they'd have to have got a number from somewhere. The more you think about it, the more it makes sense, and the more you realise that Max would be smart to jump ship. But there is another factor in this whole thing. Before I get to that though, I'm going to pause for the obligatory reminder to click the subscribe button if you're new here, and if you're enjoying this video, of course. Likes help YouTube put it on your feed and on others, which helps me out too. And if you're the kind of person who likes to support YouTubers on Patreon, then the link is down in the description as well as here on screen. A huge shout out to my patrons. Thanks for the winter heating contribution. Now let's get back to the video. Where were we? Right, another factor. Yes, it's Aston Martin. Because after all, when the regs changed back in 2014, Red Bull had a pretty great car. They just had a terrible, unreliable Renault engine. I think with Adrian Newey well and truly settled in now at Silverstone and 100% focused on next year's car, the 2026 Constructors' battle could very well be between McLaren and Aston Martin and not feature Mercedes all that much. So why all this noise around Max and Toto then? Well, for starters, the F1 media does tend to make its own stories, not in a fictional sense, but in a momentum sense. Highlight Toto's interest in Max, ask a lot of questions of both of them, get either interesting or avoiding answers, find evidence either concrete or circumstantial of negotiations, repeat the cycle. There's nothing to say that while all this is going on, there isn't a secondary offer on the table for Max to take either Lance or Fernando's seat. And boy, isn't that a contentious argument, not because the fandom as a whole doesn't have a strong opinion on who should be the one to go, but because the internal discussion would be a tough one unless one of the current Aston Martin pairing decided to hang up their racing boots voluntarily, which to be honest I think isn't entirely unlikely for either of them. And if you're Lawrence Stroll and you just really love racing and you just really love Aston Martin and your choice is between continuing to back your kid or signing one of the greatest F1 drivers of all time alongside one of the others, then that's a tough choice to make, but you have investors to answer to, and you saw what signing Lewis Hamilton did for Ferrari's company value. Yeah, he's a dad, but he's also a pretty astute business person. Honestly, I would be absolutely shocked if there wasn't a very serious conversation happening between Aston Martin and the Verstappens, but all the furore around Max and Mercedes has kept it flying well under the radar. And if I were Max, I'd be betting on Aston, not on Merc.